21 Convention 2018 of Orlando, Florida. Our next speaker is known as the Indiana Jones of the Red Pill, the shaman of the manosphere, and he's Amazon's #1 one-star bad boy. Also an artist, above all an artist, seriously. Keep that in mind for this presentation, and help me welcome Goldmund Unleashed to the stage.
Thank you, man. All right, guys. Yes, I am Goldmund. I'm going to be talking about creativity, art, and masculinity today. Very important topic for me because I don't think it's discussed nearly as much as it should be in this corner of the manosphere, red pill, self-improvement, whatever you want to call it. Creativity and art is kind of pushed to the side because I'm going to mention this later, but it's been taken over by another sector that is just kind of pushing the men out. That's what they want to do. They want to push them out. If we look at this image here, this is me in front of the Wynwood Walls. Wynwood Walls are probably the most famous art walk in the country. It's in Miami, in the neighborhood of Wynwood, and this is the most famous wall. And right now, look what's taken over the most famous wall on the most famous art walk in the country. Screaming woman, okay, look at her, she looks like Storm from the X-Men, screaming all this power. Next to her, girl power, waving the flag. Behind my hat, it actually says, grab them by a little picture of a pussy. And then she's screaming, there's some skulls here. And look at this, my favorite part. Woman with a machete chopped off the man's head. So just imagine the genders switched, right? There would be outcries, this would never be allowed, but this is on the most famous art walk in Miami right now. And it's been up all year. So this is kind of what's taken over the modern art world, and art is extremely important to me because expressing yourself in new ways and showing people new ways of seeing the world is how you change people's minds and hearts. Okay, so the artist's role is extremely important in society. That's what we're going to get to. All right, first of all, who am I? Again, like Anthony said, I am known as the Indiana Jones of the Red Pill. Because I do live for adventure, I live for story, I live for telling my stories. I'm first and foremost a writer, mostly creative nonfiction, which is describing reality in ways people can relate to, but it's kind of, you capture those details in life that really touch people. That's creative nonfiction to me. It's reality that is emotionally driven. And so when I write, I try and take my reader on the experience with me. So they experience what I've seen, and I try and live my life just as most adventurous and have fun, the most fun as possible. Also a photographer, I do sculpture. My whole life I've been into the arts, kind of got away from it for a while. Also a teacher, but first and foremost a writer, okay? So creative nonfiction is my specialty. All right, I need to tell a story before I get started on the presentation, because last year, that's me at the 21 convention last year, and I'm looking at this picture and I see a different person living in a different world. Because last year, exactly a year ago, 21 convention, it was October, I had a day job back in New York. People didn't know I had a day job, but to live in New York City, it's extremely expensive. So I had a day job to cover the bills. It was a teacher, so I was teaching, taught at a charter school, I taught at a university, and I taught at another public high school. I came home from the 21 convention. I got back that Tuesday, and when I got back into work, I got an email from the principal telling me, forget it, we covered your classes, come in, I got to talk to you about something. I kind of had an idea because I was waiting to be outed because I had my face out there and stuff like that. So I kind of had the idea. She brings me in, and she says, all right, you've been busted. Knew exactly what she was going to say. So she hands me the form that says, I think the thing was misuse of social media. Made me take down the blog, took down social media, and I was like, okay. And I was kind of on probation. 3 weeks later, I sit in front of the board of trustees, and they've got my book, Art of the One Night Stand out. I knew this was coming, so this was funny to me. Like, I was just like watching them read, and they're reading it, and they're like, looking at me, and they're like, did you do these drugs? I was like, please think of myself as like a rapper, right? Goldmund is kind of my rapper alias. I was like, that's what I was doing, and I was trying to and they laughed a little bit, and because they had invited like Fat Joe to the school, Ice Cube came and talked. Like these guys have rapped about that stuff. So I kind of tried to take that angle. They weren't having it. So then, this was probably the funniest part. I also have a website where I do coaching for guys in New York. I promise to take them to the best places. We're going to meet fun girls. We're going to have a good time. The oldest guy, he's looking at the website on his iPad, and he looks at me. He says, "So are you like a pimp?" Like, and then I just started laughing, and they kind of got mad at that too. So then, after that, I was let go. Okay, I didn't lose my license or anything, but they were like, what if the parents saw? I understood, okay? So I was let go, but I went to go think. I had some money saved up. This was last October. And I took a trip upstate to go think, because that's what I do. When situations like this happen to me, I kind of remove myself from society, and I went up to the mountains to go start, just to think about my future, what I'm gonna do. So as I'm up in the mountains, this is late October of last year, my social media, everything is cut down, cut off the internet. I get a ping from a friend of mine, a text message. He's like, dude, check this out. And I'm like, what? He's like, and he sends me a link to the biggest photography website, well, one of the biggest, called Petapixel, and it has one of my books, Introduction to Camera Game. It's a total hit piece on it. So that book, the camera game controversy. Most of you guys probably have heard about this. If you followed me at all, of course you've heard about this. But this is my book. I wrote it 4 years ago. I specifically designed the cover to be shocking. I designed it to be sleazy. That's a sleazy photograph, naked legs, weird skull, just threw that in there, and some panties. The sign says, I want to fuck you. It looks like it's a photo shoot. The lighting's terrible. And it's called How to Seduce Women Through Photography. So I wanted to mess with people when I designed the cover. This was 4 years ago, and the world was a different place 4 years ago, right? It was definitely not the moral outrage we see today. All right, so I designed the cover specifically to do that. But what camera game actually is, it's street photography. So I go up to girls in the streets, anybody I find attractive, go up to them, ask them to write something down. Usually I try and get them to think personally, something to reveal about themselves. So for instance, this girl, I asked her what she thought femininity was. And she wrote down, being in control of your emotions, owning them, and never being too afraid to wear your heart on your sleeve. So then we got to start talking about it. I found out she's an actress, okay? And that makes perfect sense from her reaction to that. And this is what I love about camera game, is because when you approach the girls like this, their guards are down, okay? You're doing the art project, and it's so different from approaching like a cold approach at a bar or if you're on a date. Because if you're on a date with a woman, she usually has the guards up, right? You're trying to put your best self forward, and you aren't really being honest for those first few hours of the date, right? You guys understand what I'm saying? With camera game, it's like all those barriers are broken down, you're doing the art project, and you get just extreme raw emotion. So that's what I love about it, and I started getting so many dates out of this. It was just unbelievable. That's why I wrote the book, because I wanted to share this. So another thing I love about it is the dynamic. So I'm in control as the director, okay? The girl's in front of the camera, I'm telling her what to do. She's getting ready, she's trying to look pretty, she's brushing her hair, and she's in her role as a female listening to my direction. Another thing I love about this, because it sets up the dynamic perfectly right away. Okay, so this is what happened. The controversy continued after I got that ping. This was the website, Petapixel. This is what they wrote. This was the first big article. It got shared hundreds of thousands of times on social media. So many countries around the world wrote other hit pieces on it. I had the CBC News try and interview me about it. And so I was kind of stressed out. But then I saw the book. It was low in the arts and photography, like selling. I sold most of my books through my website. Then I kept an eye on it. Within the first week of November, it had been 1 week, it shot up to number one. Number one. Thank you. Thank you. Very proud moment in my life, yes. Very proud moment. But that was the controversy, and that's what you guys have heard about. I've used the fake reviews. Fake reviews started to come pouring in, and I've used them on Twitter especially to find them and just to mess with the people who did them and get my revenge and sell even more books. These tweets sell tons of books. So for example, this guy, A. Bacon, wants my book banned because it denigrates women. He also likes to review the toilet paper he purchases and bites the heads off of green jelly babies because he thinks they are aliens. So this is his review. A. Bacon, this is disgusting. It should be removed from your sale list immediately. Amazon, be ashamed. That's what he wrote. He also wrote, referring to Andrex Classic Clean Toilet Roll Tissue Paper, cleans my bum a treat. Excellent price. And Prime delivery meant it won't be caught short. So you know he's run out of toilet paper before because he's not a smart guy. Also, he reviews jelly babies. Okay, very nice jelly babies. 5 stars, verified purchase. Remember to bite the heads off the green ones. They're aliens, and this is the only way to kill them. I mean, you wouldn't want to eat a live one, would you? It's like, what kind of person does that? So anyway, basically, it's very easy to track them down. If anybody ever leaves a bad review on your product, click their name and check out their review history because it is hilarious. Because they're usually losers if they're doing fake reviews. Actually, they're always losers if they're doing fake reviews. All right, so the lessons learned here. All right, so this was important because I do self-reflection a lot, and I like to share the lessons that I learned. By the way, so all the photos I'm going to use today, I went out last night with the camera. So all the photos you're going to see are girls in Orlando that I just met last night. I think this picture's hilarious. These guys were high as hell. All right, so the lessons that I learned. Number 1, I never really cared for feminism before. Like, I always viewed them as kind of like dog shit on the street. You know, just kind of avoid them, leave them alone, and, you know, gross, they smell, just go away. But this was like the dog shit, you know, took form and started attacking me. So I had to spray it down and get rid of it. So I have a fire now against feminism because they picked the war with me, right? First of all, I basically got fired from the job because a feminist found out I spoke at the 21 convention and said I was like part of the group who hated men. That was the first time. I don't think I mentioned that before, but that was the root. And then the feminists tried to get my book banned. So now I am at war with these people because they're worse than a cult because they have no real beliefs. Their own beliefs are their emotions, and it makes me sick. They're willing to go after people, ruin their lives, ruin their jobs, start rumors about them, and it's just horrible. Also, outrage culture. Outrage culture is interesting because I profited immensely from it, but I also got fired from a job. But I also had to come up with new ways of dealing with things, which thankfully I have. But you can either profit from it or get fired from your job. And right now, like I said before, there is a moral panic running through the population. I've seen this, especially when I go out in the bars, because I've been going out to bars for, I don't know, almost the past 20 years now. And I've seen just, especially now, the men are very, very timid around the women. The women are out running wild, doing whatever they wanted. That's what they want. I actually don't blame them because they're just running wild with their power because the men are giving them the power. And the men are being timid. So this is what this moral outrage has created. It's almost like there's a gender war going on in the country. Also, with this whole thing, I also learned if you're using the internet, you have to do it very, very wisely. If you're using social media, my generation, what I saw with them is Facebook came along when we were all like in college, and then it just it castrated my generation. That's what I like to say. It took the rebellion. It took the energy, that spirit, because people became afraid to be cast out from the group. And that's what Facebook did. So if you're using social media, if you're using the internet at all, you have to be smart. The people you follow, make sure you're being built up. You don't get caught up in the bullshit. That's very important. And now here I am. I'm fighting this war. I was thrown into it, and here I am. Thank God I survived. All right, on to the topic at hand. One second. All right, what is an artist? Okay, this is, it's one of those words that's been thrown around a lot and kind of lost its meaning. But to me, what I'm going to refer to it as here, an artist is a person who does something very well. They do it with their unique vision, and they do it in their own way. It doesn't have to be a person who sits around painting pretty pictures, because a lot of people, they have that view in mind when they think of an artist. There's somebody who makes you see the world in a new way, and they can really change the way you think about things. And they're very, very powerful and very, very important, because like I said, they reach people's hearts, all right? And that's what an artist does. Logically, men are very logical. That's why especially this part of the internet loves the logic, right? You know, you have the lists, this is how you do things, this is how you work out, this is how you do this. But it's not really reaching the heart. And this is what an artist does, and it really stirs it up. So that's them, and that's why they're important. I would consider people like Elon Musk. He's an artist, he's a CEO, but he has his own vision. Michael Jordan, I think he took the sport of basketball definitely to an art, because he did it all on his own. He was doing his own thing. Nobody had ever done it before. And you watch him play basketball, and it's him, and he's just poetry in motion. So he's also an incredible artist. All right, what happened to art? Why did the ugly and profane get pushed to the front and the beautiful get pushed behind? I like this image. All right, so what happened? This has been interesting, and a lot of people have noticed this. I grew up around the New York City art scene, I started getting into it seriously like the late 90s, early 2000s. I was very into the music scene down in New York City. And I moved there specifically to Brooklyn because of the art scene. Back then, it was all about creativity and, you know, making something new, making the world, just introducing new things to the world, making it a more interesting place. That's what New York City art scene was all about. Then in the mid to late 2000s, it started getting very involved with identity politics. So people were that just infiltrated, you know, that's when everybody was concerned about their identity. They wanted to celebrate being gay, transgender, all that just kind of flooded the art scene in New York. And really, literally, everywhere you went, that's all you saw. Even if you go to the New Museum in New York, it's all identity politics. Now, especially since the election, it's politics. And it's sick, and it got taken over basically by homosexuals and women. They took the arts and they just ran wild with it. And the men got pushed out. So if you're even interested, say somebody's a born artist and they want to go to art school, they go to art school and they are surrounded by just, you know, the politics of the left just are, you know, the universities are bad, but the art schools and the universities are by far the worst. So that's what happened. It got taken over by homosexuals and women, so the masculine men got pushed out. That's what they wanted, that's what they got. So if you want to do this is going to have to do it on your own. This has to be on you. If you have that stir in your blood, it's something you have to do on your own because the world right now has been taken over by the ugly and the profane. Okay, art and the masculine and the feminine. Now this is something I love about art because I'm a very masculine person. I grew up very, very aggressive, like high testosterone, and I always got suppressed, right? Your teachers suppress you. The women in my family told me to calm down, I'm gonna hurt myself. And so that masculine side of me got suppressed. Then when I learned to game, okay, because I was very frustrated sexually in my 20s because all this blue pill stuff I had been taught, I had no idea how to deal with women. Found game, and then, of course, I went wild with game because I got my power back. You know, I was going to go out and get some pussy. And I was like, yeah. So you know how it is, just like, I go nuts. Now it's more under control, but for the first few years, forget about it. I went, that just swung all the way that way. So yeah, then I got my masculinity back. It was reclaimed, and I was getting laid. Everything was great, okay? But then I started getting more back into the arts, and especially with the writing and the photography. And I found out that when, say, I live my day-to-day life, I go out, I'm competitive, I'm aggressive at work, I do my things, I interact with people. Then when I sit down to create, I'm tapping into a part of me that is more feminine. So we have these two sides to our brain. The left brain, the right brain is more creative. When you sit down to create, you have to tap into that creative side. I also, my pen name, Goldmund. Some of you probably read the book Narcissus and Goldmund. Have you? Yeah. So the book Narcissus and Goldmund is basically that duality of man, the masculine side of the mind, Narcissus, and then Goldmund, which is the more feminine side, the more creative side. And it's about the duality and the battle between the two and the swings every man takes in his life towards one or the other. But the trick is creating the balance. That's what you want, the harmony. What art does, it brings you back and it helps you get in touch with that kind of energy. And it's just a wonderful, beautiful feeling to do that. So I'm a big fan of that, sitting down to work and accessing that other part of my brain. And that's what art really does. All right, harnessing your creative energy. All right, now this is where people, they ask me when they get started, because some people are just born artists and they want to find that creative energy and that inspiration. They want to know where to find it. In our culture, it's really difficult because our culture is all about consuming things. And there's so many distractions, social media, everything around us, which is not natural. Okay, so all these distractions keep us from finding real inspiration. So my two main sources of inspiration, and I've talked about these a ton, especially one more than the other. First off is going to be in nature. This is one of my main sources of inspiration right now. Just this past weekend, I was able to go up and do a photo shoot up in the Adirondack Mountains. Came across some amazing things. So when I come across stuff like this, always have your eyes open. It could be nature. Nature is for me. It could be anything for you. Have your eyes open, whatever draws you in. Like when I saw this, like the patterns, these, I think they're mushrooms that were growing on this tree. I'd never seen something like this before. That's why they drew me in. And then when you sit there and look at them, it's just, you see that they even take the color of the mushroom matches the bark of the tree. And it's amazing. And the thing is, they said something. So we're walking along the trail, noticed these mushrooms, stared at them for a while, and then I knew something was going to change. And then all of a sudden, we're walking, turn the corner, the trail gets treacherous, and it starts a downpour. That's just me making up my story, but that's what happened, and I blame that treacherous downpour on these beautiful mushrooms. All right, also, this is another thing. This is what nature does for me. When I see this, these are the autumn leaves changing. They were speaking to me. These were great examples because you actually see them changing. You can see I think it's chlorophyll in there that makes it change, but you can see these right in the midst of their change. It just reminds me, like, people change. The season of autumn is definitely a time when I personally change. I've undergone many transformations in my life, which I think many artists do. It's just a natural part of the process. But these leaves just reminded me how much autumn means. And I'm glad the 21 convention takes place in autumn because this is the perfect time for change. And if you're ready for change in your life, this is the place to do it. This is the time to do it. It's autumn. Autumn is a time for change. You're here. You want to improve, and this is how you do it. Again, I'm showing you pictures of nature because this is just so close to my heart. I spent the month of June in the swamp in Florida, in the Everglades. I came across a family of snail kites. I don't know if you guys know snail kites, but there's less than 1,000 of them left in the United States. So I came across a family of them. This was a juvenile, so every day I would go, every morning, go to see where he was, what he was doing, and it was amazing because the juveniles are young, so they're just starting to learn how to live life. So he was out every single day scanning his territory. He was getting in fights with other birds. He was learning where the snails were. He taught me how to be a specialist. Do you see this little beak on him? It's a little pointy beak. The only thing this guy can eat with that pointy beak is snails. So he specializes totally in snails. That's his main diet. He has to move to where the snails are. So I lucked out. I was hiking a part of the swamp where there was just a snail invasion. So he was doing that, and he was watching me just as much as I was watching him. He also taught me the power of observation. Especially at that time, I needed to come up with a creative way to make more money since getting fired from my day job. Take a look at the big picture, see what you can do, scan your environment, see what's going on, find out where the food source is, find out what you need, and if you need to specialize, do it. So the snail kite was very inspiring this summer. And of course, there's women. That was the girl who came up with me to the Adirondacks. We did a photo shoot together. Main source of inspiration, it was for a while. Now it's switched more over to nature, but women did it. Women were, they're everything I'm not. They have their grace and their beauty. The female form is basically, it's all the laws of the universe in perfect harmony. That's a naked woman to me. It's just, there's nothing like it on the planet. All right, another great thing about art is being able to tap into your higher self. So again, this is when you sit down. When you sit down to create, you tap in also to that other side of your brain, the feminine energy side, the creative side. It's a source, and you don't think about it. When you sit down to create, you don't think like, okay, I'm going to tap into my higher self right now. Sometimes you might. But when I was making this presentation, I was thinking meta about it, and I wanted to make this presentation nice. And I was thinking about the process of thinking, which was interesting, and going deep in there, that's accessing your best self. So say you sit down to create, you're tapping into a source that is better than who you are on the outside, who you are when you walk around, when you're just regular life. You're going deep in, and I've heard it referred to before as your daemon. And this is super important, especially for people who are born artists with that creative spirit in them. Listening to your daemon, that's that spirit, the higher self, the genius that you want to tap into that will help you create something really that comes from the soul. So when you do that, if you don't listen to your daemon, it's so close to the word demon, because that demon, if you don't listen to your daemon, he's going to turn into a demon. He's going to eat at you. He's going to gnaw at you. I struggled with depression for many, many years in my 20s because I wasn't expressing myself like I needed to. That was my daemon turning into a demon and gnawing at me because I wasn't expressing myself. I was being suppressed. I was letting the world suppress me. I was listening to my teachers, listening to the females tell me to stop being so aggressive and stop, being who I was. And that just turned into a very bad depression, which led to some mental illness, which I had to deal with. That was very, very harsh in my mid-20s. And then, you take the antidepressants, they never work. The only way I really got rid of that was when I tapped in and I started listening to my daemon. So that is your inner self. Another beautiful thing about art, whatever you decide to create. I wish I was a musician. I wish I didn't have to be a writer, because then I wouldn't get nearly much trouble as I have. If I was a musician, it would be easy. I could say the things I wanted, but it would come out in a different way. But I'm not musically inclined at all. Love music, but I'm not just, that's not who my daemon is. So listening to your daemon, if you're struggling with some kind of depression, it might be your daemon trying to say, hey, look at me. You're not expressing yourself like you should, and you should really start exploring what kind of creative outlet you can express yourself freely and let your daemon speak. All right, now subcultures. I've always been interested in subcultures because that's just what I've always been drawn to. I moved to New York City for the punk rock scene because I loved, as an angry young man, there's nothing like punk rock. It was just so awesome. And late 90s, early 2000s, they had their subculture. And then look what happened to punk rock. It got commercialized, watered down as soon as the masses found it, and now it just sounds like any other kind of pop music. Also, subcultures like the Beatniks. I was very influenced by people like Jack Kerouac, that kind of subculture that came out of the 50s and 60s, which was like a rebellion against everything around them. Right? First of all, also, which I think is interesting about the Beatniks, they were driven by sex at first. Right? Those were guys who wanted to go out, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and party. And then when they were getting the sex, then they started to they became red-pilled. And I think this right now, where we are right now, is an important subculture. Right now, we're going against the mainstream. We're saying, hey, there's something very, very wrong with the way most people are thinking. There's something very, very wrong with this gender war that we've created, and we're doing something about it. And we're taking the things in our own hands, and we're becoming more powerful, and we're actually changing people's lives. My life was changed completely by the information from speakers in this room, from all the manosphere, the red pill, completely changed me from being, depressed, wondering what my meaning in life was, all that stuff. So this is where the true artists are, in subcultures. And right now at places like the 21 Convention, we need more men who are willing to step up and put their emotions and their heart on their sleeve and say, okay, I can express myself freely, and let's go do this. Okay, so this is where the subcultures are. We need to bring more artists in, and this is a place to do it. So I know there's a lot of creative people out there. I've had a lot of guys come up to me saying that I inspired them to do something from all sorts of the creative arts, and it's just really helped out their lives. So if you have any kind of interest in it, I implore you to take that and run with it and not be afraid to do it no matter what the mainstream is doing. You have this kind of support with you, and we're all here to help. All right. Thanks, guys. By the way, that says keep your mind pure. That's you. She was out just like 2 blocks away. So. Go out and party tonight, guys.
Thank you. Trying to find my inner Damon. Love writing, photography, dance. Can't make any money on them so far. What would you suggest are great ways of identifying what they truly are to get past depression and anxiety?
Meditation was one that really helped. I mean, I don't think I meant to touch on this in my speech, but this around my neck, this is ayahuasca. I mean, I had to overcome a lot of, like from my religious background, very strictly like that. Ayahuasca was the #1 thing that got me in touch with my inner Damon. If you're really having to struggle with it, I would say consider it. Ayahuasca will call you. The reason I'm standing on this stage is because of ayahuasca. I mean, literally, during my first ever ayahuasca ceremony, I went deep into the energy realm where there's other beings, and they laid me out on an altar like this, and they took a scythe and they split my chest open, and that inner Damon, all my inner universe came out into the world. It came out from being bottled up in here and just went out. It became part of the universe, and those beings told me, if you don't share this, it's not going to be good. And they did it in a way that I was not going to go against it. So, I mean, that's something to consider. It's a pretty intense thing to suggest, but that's who I am.
Many in this room live a closeted life because of their beliefs. You've had the consequences of being outed when you were fired. If you had a do-over, what changes would you make to extend the time that you had and that shelf life as a career? And how did the hit piece afterwards impact what it's been like to try to interview with anyone else moving forward?
I'm glad that way that worked out because I'm so stubborn that I needed that kick in the ass to get fired just to get my life really in line. What would I have done? I don't know. I would have worked harder to get separated from that a lot faster. I could have done it just if I wanted to throw myself out there, but it was nervous energy, like I was worried about paying the rent in New York because it was so high. But I didn't realize I had all these other resources at hand. So I would definitely work to set myself free first. That's it. Your other question was, how would the negative stuff affect? I don't care. I love it. I'm not going to get interviewed by anybody. I'm on my own. I'm a complete independent entity right now. So there's nothing anybody can do. I'm not going to try and stir up controversy, but I don't really give a shit about anything else. They can say whatever they want.
Hey, so I have an interesting question, I think. And it's pretty much this Damon that you talk about, the higher self. Does it usually come after like a certain phase of your life, or is it just spontaneous? For example, prodigies, musicians who are like really good and express themselves creatively at a very young age.
Yeah, so I think it happens for most normal people, not like the super prodigies who are like born with this demon screaming and they're able to express it. It happens with most people with stages of maturity. And it happened to me personally, and I've seen it happen to others. I saw it happen to my younger brother who became a musician. It was after he matured and became a man. And it was usually after we had to go through some really stressful situations. My grandfather said this was going to happen to us because our father's Native American. And he said, before you become a man, you're going to pass a test. Both of us went through some severe psychological issues. But then after we overcame those, it was much easier to tap in and start listening to that Damon. But then, like I said, man, ayahuasca was the mother.
Hey, Goldmund.
Hey, Jack.
You mentioned about subcultures and how subcultures surface into the primary culture and they get sort of subsumed and diluted. This is a subculture here. And I think we've seen the trajectory of this subculture is that it is beginning to surface. And my question to you is what risk is there for dilution, co-option, or what do you see happening as the years go by, as this subculture begins to gain a little bit more prominence?
I do see it getting diluted, as Rollo says, purple pill. And I do see that happening. I mean, self-improvement, all this stuff that we talk about is really good, but the red pill is so difficult to swallow. I think it'll just, if the masses want it, they'll cling on to the things that sound good, but people will be able to take. I really can't answer that question, but it'll be interesting to see because it is getting bigger and bigger. And once people try and see how much of a change is happening, they're going to try and monotonize and dilute it, and it'll be interesting to watch.
G'day, Goldmund. I'm just wondering, what do you say to the girls before you take their picture? What do you ask them to write down?
Most of the time, if I'm doing the project, I have them write down. I say, hey, I do a little wave. I have the camera out. I don't usually have the pad out because then it looks like I want them to buy something. Have the camera out and say, hey, I'm doing a photography project. Can I ask you a question? Take your photo. And then 80% will say yes. I went up to some girls last night and they were like, no, sorry, we're models. We can't do that. We're on contract. I was like, oh, what else are you doing tonight? But yeah, that's it. Tell them I'm doing a photography project. Or if I'm not doing the project, I just say, hey, I like your style. Do you mind to take your portrait? And that works a lot of the time too.
So you don't ask them to write down their dream or a wish or something?
It changes all the time. Yeah. That was one big project. I had them write down a fantasy. I had them write down something they wish they happened tonight. Something that they wish would happen tonight. Because those were the ones where I was like really trying to get laid, and I tried to make it sexual. So yeah, that was when I first got started. Now, like I said, I love exploring the intellect. This camera game has evolved over the years like you wouldn't believe. Like it is so interesting to me now. Of course, I'm still trying to get laid and find good dates and stuff like that, but comes with the territory.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks. So you got fired, you went up to New York, you got the text from your buddy about the hit piece, but you didn't finish. What did you come up with? Like, what did you think about while you're up there, and what ideas did you come down with? And a second one, if I can, have had some profound breakthroughs with LSD. When you talk about transition into something else, mushrooms specifically, how would you get over like a bad trip 15 years ago that is keeping you from doing that?
Okay, so your first question. While I was up there, I realized I had the power of my audience and the internet. So I used it. I pushed my coaching more. My coaching is pretty expensive. I offer photography workshops. And then, I've driven up and down the East Coast 5 times this year doing photography workshops, making money that way. I did a Patreon, monotonized my website. I was selling books on the streets. I was doing that. So I used my audience. I was like, I have this. I have to pull the trigger and make this happen. Yeah. And then your second question. So if you had a bad trip 15 years ago, I don't like LSD. I'm much more of a fan of mushrooms. I think they're very healing. They have some it's a very powerful plant medicine. If you do a small dose, see how you react to it, you're not going to have a bad trip. So just do a small one and then see how your body reacts. And that's it. But mushrooms are good medicine.
Thanks.
Hi, Goldmund. It's become the coin of the realm. Hello? It's become the coin of the realm in a lot of circles lately to say politics is downstream from culture, I think especially on the left. It breaks my heart to say because I'm a huge fan of Bob Dylan and so many other artists in that pastiche, but do you see the current focus on identity politics as largely resulting from the subcultures that have sprung up since the counterculture in the 50s and 60s and continuing through to the punk scene that you were referring to, or how do you see the relationship between the two?
Yeah, I think the internet has given a voice to the subcultures now. So when there's not really too many subcultures like real ones anymore because the internet gives voice to everything. So the identity politics came a very popular one to cling on to because the virtue signaling is so easy with that, right? With the gender, and with Facebook and social media, people love that. So it wasn't really a subculture anymore. So now, this is the real subculture, like the people trying to make their lives better. And this is not something you can tout. It's not virtue signaling. We're not virtue signaling here at all. We're trying to make ourselves better and make the world better. So I might have lost track of your question, but I hope I hit on it. All right.
First, thanks to you and Eric Crowley, also known as Runts and Magic, for encouraging me to try grandmother ayahuasca. And 4 years and 50 ceremonies later, I'd like to know, how has it changed your attitude towards sex and love?
She taught me different things at different stages that I needed to hear at the proper time. So in the beginning, when I did it, it was just that was when my inner universe came out. That's when I needed to go crazy and spread my seed and get that out of the way. The other ones, she taught me to be more empathetic. So that's when I go about game, I am very careful that I don't emotionally damage women, because I had done that in the past. And ayahuasca did make me much more empathetic. I mean, I still date and sleep around a lot, but I screen for healthy energy. So it's the girls with the bad energy that I know how to screen for, and they even stay away from me. They don't like me right off the bat because they can tell I'm screening them. But the girls with the good energy, I bring them in much easier now. She taught me different things at different stages. Thanks for making me think about that. Intro.
Thank you for the speech. I have a question regarding you mentioned about the feminine side, or how do you relate the feminine side with creativity when we know that there is no Mozart or inventors or Picasso's woman version? How do you relate?
I was talking about the side of the brain. So even when Mozart was composing and Picasso was composing, he's going to the feminine side of the brain, the creative side. I mean, the feminine is there to create. They create life. So I'm not talking about being feminine, like acting feminine and submissive. It's the creative part of the mind. So the right side of the brain is the creative part. The right side, when you access that part, that's when you're tapping into those creative powers. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the feminine side. Not talking about women in general, it's just the side of the brain.
How do you screen for energy vampires?
Oh man, this is really, I've been trying to put this in words for a long time, but it does come through intuition. So American girls have that look on their face, and I can see it, just that dead, and the resting bitch face, and just reactions to being civil. They don't need over-the-top asshole game. Okay, that's kind of how I test them out, and how they react to compliments and normal human interaction, which is hard to do on a Friday and Saturday night when you're out and their bitch shields are up. And like I said, it's much more intuition. I've gotten very much, especially since tapping into my inner self, I've been very intuitive and I can read people very, very well. But it's extremely hard to put into words. So the day I put it into words, I'm going to dedicate it to you. All right, man? All right. All right.
That's all the questions and time we have. Give it up for Goldmund Unleashed.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Goldmund.